Visit EWTNnews.com. Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders starts now.
What's stopping you from becoming a Catholic?
Why can't women become priests?
1-833-288-EWTN.
I don't understand why I have to earn salvation.
1-833-288-3986.
What's stopping? Why do I need to confess my sins to a priest?
What's stopping you? This is Called to Communion with Dr. David Anders on the EWTN Global Catholic Radio Network.
Hey everybody, welcome to the Tuesday edition of Call to Communion here on EWTN Radio. If you're new to our program, this program is just for you, the non-Catholic. Maybe you were an active Catholic years ago, maybe you've never been a Catholic, but you've got questions about the Catholic faith in any event, or maybe you'd like to tell us what is stopping you from becoming a Catholic. In any event, here's our phone number, 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. If you're listening to us outside of North America, please dial the U.S. country code and then 205-271-2985. Also, you can shoot us an email if you would rather do that. The address ctc@ewtn.com, ctc@ewtn.com. Charles Beery is our producer, Matt Gabinski our phone screener, Jeff Burson handles social media for us, and we are streaming right now on YouTube and Facebook Live. If you'd like to ask a question via those two streaming platforms, put that question of yours in the comments box. Jeff will see it. He'll send it to us here in the studio. Hopefully we can get it answered on today's show. I'm Tom Price along with Dr. David Anders.
Tom, how are you today?
Great. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing decent, thank you.
Got a very sad question to lead us off today. I don't like to do that, but it's an important question, so let's just tackle it. And for obvious reasons here, this is going to remain anonymous. Dear Dr. Anders, my question is about forgiveness. Should a wife be able to forgive her husband for committing adultery if he is still involved with the other woman?
I am very sorry.
Yeah.
I am very sorry. Let's get really clear on what we mean by forgiveness here.
Okay.
Because I think that's critical to answering your question. Forgiveness means that I would be willing to have a virtuous relationship with someone who was also willing to have that virtuous relationship. So, like love, real friendship is a reciprocal sharing of genuine goods, ultimately ourselves, reciprocal sharing of the good that is myself, right, in a common project of virtue. So, you know, when two bank robbers have an affinity over robbing banks, that's not really Christian friendship, right? That's just a simulacrum of friendship. Real friendship is when we mutually will one another's genuine good.
Sure.
Okay. Now, if you wish the genuine good of an adulterer, what do you want for that person? Chastity.
Yeah.
What you want for an adulterer is chastity. So forgiveness would mean I would like to be in union with you in a chaste marriage. Right now, you're unwilling to be in union with me in a chaste marriage.
Mm-hmm.
Forgiveness would mean I am open to the possibility of a chaste marriage with you at such time as you determine that's what you also want. But I am not willing to be in union with you in an unfaithful marriage. I'm not going to agree with you. I'm not going to be in union with you about your decision to commit adultery. And forgiveness, genuine charity, does not require me to approve or tolerate this behavior. And as a practical matter, the church would say, you have all the rights here. The wounded, the injured party here has all the rights. You can withhold conjugal relations, for example, lawfully, legitimately. Mm-hmm. I'm not going to be in union with you in that way,
Yeah.
unless you're going to be exclusively in union with me in that way. I'm not going to share you with another woman.
Right.
So you can withhold conjugal relations. You can sue for civil divorce if this thing has become so intolerable to you and to your home, which I imagine it is, right? You can sue for civil divorce. I'm not advising that. I'm just telling you what your options are, right? And the church says you are not obligated to renew conjugal relations even if he repents. You're not obligated to. Church says you're not obligated to, because the wound here against the marriage is profound. You can renew conjugal relations. That's your option. And if you do so, then it will be regarded by the church that you have forgiven, right? But you're not obligated to, and the church doesn't ask you to. That's really your choice. But I would say forgiveness here means a willingness to accept a chaste, faithful, holy marriage at such time as the offending party is determined to do that. But until then, you're not in union. And you can hold out that possibility of union, but now it's on him to come around and accept that possibility, not on you to accept his immoral behavior.
Appreciate your email. Thank you so much for it. Here's one, a quick one from Carlos. Can you explain the difference in your understanding of the spiritual life as a Calvinist and as a Catholic? And are there any concrete differences in your spiritual life since your conversion?
Oh, heavens, yes. There are concrete differences. So, in a nutshell, I think that the central difference between being a Calvinist and being a Catholic, the central difference of the level of spirituality, is that Calvinism is the religion that cultivates sort of smugness as a spiritual attitude, because it's founded on the conviction that I can have absolute certainty of my election, right? I can know for sure that I'm going to heaven, irrespective of the quality of my moral life. And in fact, the Westminster Confession would teach that a Calvinist should aspire to have an infallible certainty of his own election, right?
Yeah.
And what often comes with that is a kind of equally subjective certainty that that other guy isn't going to heaven, or that he at least is not elect. So,
I see the smug part.
So differentiating between the company of the elect, of which I am a member, and all the unwashed heathen masses, right, sets me up in a relationship of superiority and elitism with respect to the rest of the world.
Maybe we'll talk a little more about this on the other side of the break.
Sure.
Carlos, thank you so much for that email. We'll also get to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. Stay with us.
Faith is a precious gift from God. As the largest religious media network in the world, EWTN has an important role in educating others about our Catholic faith and spreading the good news of salvation. We invite you to explore our numerous pages of historical faith documents, prayers, teachings, and other current issues in Catholicism today. Visit EWTN.com and click Catholicism. EWTN, the Global Catholic Network.
Father Benedict Groeschel.
I must tell you that from what I observe from very young people, all of these blasphemers, all of these mockers are in for a tough time. Because the devil bites his own tail. And I find among young people a growing reverence and longing for God. I find a decline in the cynicism and skepticism around it, because it had to destroy itself. No one can live on being an enemy of God. It's too crazy, it's too absurd, it's too dark, it's too bleak. God is beautiful, God is holy. Why in the world mock God?
EWTN. Live truth. Live Catholic.
Call to communion on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon here on EWTN Radio. Our phone number 833-288-EWTN. If you have a question for Dr. David Anders, or if you'd like to explain to us what is stopping you from becoming a Catholic. 833-288-3986. In a moment, we're going to continue that question that we received from Carlos, but first, let me tell you about a really cool book called Romek and Wanda, the great political faith and love story of the 20th century. Now, who is this couple? Why should we even care? Well, Romek was the highest-ranking communist official who ever defected to the West. He held powerful positions of leadership. Now, in preparation to defect, he fed information to Pope John Paul II on the happenings inside the Communist Party. His wife, Wanda, was a lifelong Catholic. She took the political and faith journey alongside her husband, seeing him, an avowed atheist, over the course of 40 years, become in full union with the Catholic faith. Now, this was originally published under the title The Liberation of One by Romuald Spaskowski. This second edition includes a preface by Father Bill Watson, S.J. It's a landmark reminder of the horrors of applied Marxism at a time when many here in the West seem determined to forget those lessons. Wow! Romek and Wanda, the great political faith and love story of the 20th century. It's available right now at EWTNRC.com. Do check it out, EWTNRC.com. Sounds pretty interesting, doesn't it?
Yeah, first I thought it was a movie by John Cleese.
That's funny. So let's get to the second part of this question from Carlos. He led off by saying, can you please explain the difference in your understanding of the spiritual life as a Calvinist and then as a Catholic, which we did unpack. And now the second part, are there any concrete differences in your spiritual life since your conversion?
Oh, yeah, it's profoundly different. It's profoundly different. So because Calvinism is grounded in this assurance of salvation that a person is alleged to possess, the sort of the moral energy of the thing can be oftentimes is directed towards proselytizing others, right? Either that or making one's own election and calling secure, as it were, by perfecting one's knowledge of the Reformed tradition and being able to elaborate the arguments and really cultivating that sense of specialness that is integral to Calvinist identity. Now, for a Catholic, the whole purpose, nature, and meaning of the Christian life is just profoundly different. The Catholics have an understanding of spiritual progress, where we grow from being infants in Christ to fully mature by ultimately conforming our lives and hearts to Jesus, and that passes through recognizable stages. There's an ascetical dimension. There's a dimension of trying to purify the elements of our personality and of our emotional life, and ultimately to conform the heart to Jesus. And this takes place through the objective means of the sacraments of the Catholic Church. Now, in saying that, I recognize that a lot of my Reformed and Presbyterian friends would be saying, we think that too, and that's true. There's a sacramental and mystical and transformative dimension to the Reformed tradition, to the Presbyterian or Calvinist tradition. And I would certainly not deny that Presbyterians and Calvinists and Reformed Christians do in fact have transformative experiences, and they live moral lives, or that many of them do, and they can have a mystical relationship with Jesus. I'm not denying that, but that keynote of absolute assurance that comes at the beginning can often work to frustrate some of the more redemptive aspects of the Calvinist tradition. I know in my own case it certainly did. Whereas now, today, I feel far less anxiety over the question of my eternal destiny. Ironically, it's ironic because, one of the justifications for Calvinism, this note of assurance, is it's supposed to bring peace of conscience. I find that I'm far less anxious over the question of my eternal destiny. I'm more anxious over the question of what is the quality of my moral life, my spiritual life right now, today? And what kind of father am I? What kind of husband am I? What kind of employer or employee am I? How am I living my Christian life well, according to the practice of the virtues? And so my moral energies are exercised in a different direction than they were when I was a Calvinist.
I think a lot of that came home, and Charles would know about this. We this past week, we lost a member here of the EWTN family. One of our employees worked in human relations. I won't go into it, but he died very suddenly. in his 50s. But it just goes to show that we never know the day or the hour. So we got to be ready.
You got to be ready.
Got to be ready. If you're ready now, let's go to the phones at 833-288-EWTN. We begin with Mary, a first-time caller in Amarillo, listening on St. Valentine Catholic Radio. Hello, Mary. What's on your mind today?
Hello. I wanted to talk to you about why I am not a Catholic.
Okay.
I listen to EWTN all the time. I love the programming. I've learned so much about the faith. It's very appealing to me. But I am a longtime Christian, and I belong to a church that I've been in for decades. I consider the people there my family. I have served there. I love them. They love me. And I feel like if I left my church to join the Catholic Church, that it would be almost a betrayal to this church family that I've had for all these years. And I would just like to hear your comments on that.
I'm sympathetic. I'm profoundly sympathetic.
Sure.
And, in my own journey to the Catholic faith, sounds like I didn't have quite as many decades behind my Protestantism as you do, but I had quite a few. I had all my life to that point when I became Catholic, and I became Catholic as an adult. And I won't lie to you, I found the transition to be a difficult one and painful. And I certainly would not wish on another human being the same level of emotional discomfort that I experienced. I wish I could tell you that becoming a Catholic was always hunky-dory, easy to, peasy, and everybody would love you and there would be no problems. I wish I could communicate that to you. I don't think it's the case. It certainly was not the case for me. And so I'm really, really sympathetic. I'm really sympathetic because the suffering that you would entail, that would entail is real. It's real. And I won't lie to you that the consolations of being Catholic, and there are many, might not immediately or might not ever compensate you for the experience of loss that you would have. And you might find yourself as a Catholic looking back with nostalgia and pain and a sense of loss that might never be ameliorated in some sense. So there'd be kind of a note of sadness about you in your Catholic life. So what should you do? Well, ultimately, I'm going to, of course, leave that to determination of your own conscience, but here are some considerations. Jesus Christ said, "Do not think that I have come to bring peace on the earth. I have not come to bring peace but a sword. For I have come to set a man against his father, and a daughter against her mother, and a daughter-in-law against her mother-in-law, and a person's enemies will be those of his own household." Those are the words of Christ. So Jesus anticipated that in at least some cases, fidelity to conscience and to the word of the Lord would come with family division. And he spoke about it. He prophesied about it. Jesus himself, Isaiah says, was a man of sorrows and familiar with suffering. I don't wish suffering on anybody, least of all you. But suffering can be redeemed. It was redeemed in the case of Christ for our sake. That suffering can be redeemed in you. The Catholic life is a call to suffer. Jesus said, if anyone would be my disciple, let him take up his cross and follow me. Now, I've been a Catholic 20 years now, almost. And I will tell you with certainty that I did not anticipate the ways that I would suffer as a Catholic. I would not, if I had a time machine, I would clearly try to get around the suffering, like knowing what I know now. I wouldn't get around the Catholic. Those sufferings have brought virtues into my life. Those sufferings have brought wisdom into my life that I would not want to part with. And if you said to me, what if I could spare you the suffering, but you'd lose the wisdom? Wow. I don't know if I could give it up.
Yeah.
Because I value what I've gained. But does it come with hurt? Absolutely. That's the way of the cross. That's what Jesus taught us. That's what Jesus modeled for us.
Things to pray about, and that's for sure. Mary, thank you so much for your call. Hope that's helpful for you. That opens up a line for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Call to communion on this Tuesday afternoon here on EWTN. Let's go now to Margaret, a first-time caller in New York City, listening on Sirius XM, Channel 130. Hey, Margaret, what's on your mind today?
Yes, I had just a quick question. What are the major differences between the Catholic faith and Church and her beliefs and Episcopalian Church?
Thanks. I really appreciate the question. So in the 16th century, beginning of the 16th century, Catholicism was well established in England. The English king was a Catholic. All the bishops, of course, in England were Catholic. They were in union with the Pope. King Henry VIII, however, wanted to divorce his wife, and the Pope would not grant him an annulment. And so King Henry said, well, I've had enough of you, Pope. I'll be head of my own church. And he forced the English Catholics into schism with the Pope of Rome, and he established himself as the head of the English Church. At that time, while the English Church was technically in schism with Rome, they'd broken their obedience to Rome. In other respects, they didn't give up all of their Catholic identity. So the actual beliefs of the bishops and even of the king and of the people regarding things like the Mass and the sacraments and Christ and salvation remained more or less intact. But the longer that England stayed out of union with Rome, the more the English Church began to take on the character of the Continental Reformation. So Calvinism specifically, the religion of John Calvin in Geneva, Presbyterians. And so when the English finally got around to compiling a doctrinal statement, here's what we believe, the so-called 39 Articles, what they adopted were beliefs more or less characteristic of Calvinism. So while they retained, say, bishops and liturgy and hierarchy, many of the external trappings of the Catholic faith, at least in appearance, the underlying convictions about the nature of God, the nature of sin, the nature of salvation began to differ quite extensively. That included differences about the meaning of ordination. What does it mean to be a priest? The meaning of the liturgy. What does the Eucharist mean? And because of those differences, the Catholic faith regards Anglicanism as having given up the real episcopacy, the real priesthood, the real Eucharist. So you could attend an Anglican liturgy and you could see some visual similarities in gesture and ritual, but we understand the meaning of those quite differently. And even if the meaning is understood to be the same, the reality is different as well.
Yeah.
All right, so in a nutshell, Catholics believe that Christ founded a church, a visible society, an organization, an institution, if you will, and gave it a divine mandate to teach his word, his gospel, to all nations, and to sanctify, to make holy the people that would be members of that community, to make them like him, particularly through the use of sacraments, through the Eucharist, through baptism, through holy orders, through marriage, through confession, through anointing. That the way we get to heaven is through these sacramental signs and mysteries. We are literally transformed morally in imitation of the life and character of Jesus, and that we're judged by God on the quality of our moral lives that have been transformed, we hope and pray, in grace. The Anglican Church is kind of all over the place today, and you'll find different statements of belief and practice in different Anglican communities, but by and large, they don't really accept that picture of the Christian life, right? They don't think that there was a determinate church body founded by Jesus with the divine mandate in that way. They think of the church as consisting as sort of a collection of different groups, of which they are one. Many of them don't think about salvation primarily in terms of the transformation of the moral life, but rather as something that comes simply through faith. They have different beliefs about the nature of the sacraments themselves as to whether or not they convey grace or whether they convey Christ to us or whether they're mere signs. And of course, Anglicans, you'll find differing beliefs about that as well. And today, since the 20th century, Anglicans and Episcopalians and Catholics differ radically over issues of human sexuality and marriage. That's probably the most obvious difference if you just kind of take a poll, so to speak. So Catholic Church teaches that God made humanity male and female, and that he did so for the propagation of the species, and that we should be joined together in holy matrimony to raise a family, and that that's the normative way of expressing our sexuality. And it has a meaning, and it has a purpose, namely to replenish society through procreation of children. And the best way for that to happen is for husband and wife to be faithful to one another until death. Anglicanism was founded on the right of divorce. And so the indissolubility of marriage is not held. And increasingly, belief in the identity of human persons as male and female ordered essentially to one another in their sexual lives has also been given up by many Episcopalians, such that sex is whatever you want to make of it, and sexual identity, whatever you want to make of it.
There you go, Margaret. Quite a few differences, as you can hear. Thank you so much, and we hope that is helpful for you. In a moment, we'll get back to the phones, and we're waiting for your call right now at 833-288-EWTN. If you call right now, we can probably get you on today's show. I certainly hope so. 833-288-3986. Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders on this beautiful Tuesday afternoon here on EWTN. Stay with us.
We live in a world of extreme polarization, often consumed by anger and anxiety, a climate that is dividing our country and our world, a division so wide there is even confusion within our church. And today, most secular news sources only serve to deepen this divide. But at Catholic News Agency, our mission is to be a witness to the truth of our Catholic faith, providing trustworthy, relevant, and timely news affecting the global church, as well as in-depth coverage of the Pope, the Vatican, the Church in the U.S., and the ongoing battle for the culture of life. Every day, CNA's reporters and editors maintain a continuous, faithful watch on the people and the events that impact lives and the souls of Catholics, delivering more news from a Catholic perspective than anyone else. Catholic News Agency, a service of EWTN News. Trusted, timely, Catholic. Engage at CatholicNewsAgency.com.
You can be a part of Call to Communion. Text EWTN to 55000, wait for a response, then text us your first name and question. It's that easy. Message and data rates may apply.
EWTN Global Catholic Network is the largest religious media network in the world. 11 global TV channels, English and Spanish radio networks with over 500 AM and FM radio affiliates, one of the largest Catholic websites in the world, dozens of podcasts every week, social media, electronic and print news services, and EWTN Publishing. EWTN is the global Catholic network. For more about EWTN, visit EWTN.com.
Hi, this is Cy Kellett. Later today on Catholic Answers Live, 2 hours of open forum. Jimmy Akin, Tim Staples, Catholic Answers Live, 6 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio. Now back to Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders.
Hey, what's stopping you from becoming a Catholic? Let's talk about that here on EWTN's Call to Communion with Dr. David Anders. A couple of lines open for you right now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Interesting email here from Daniel. Hi, Dr. Anders. Could you tell me whether we can accept a Trinitarian baptism from a Protestant who rejects the Catholic doctrine of baptismal regeneration? For example, a Baptist who believes that baptism doesn't save, but is merely a sign or symbol of their having already been regenerated when they accept the gospel and were converted. God bless, Daniel.
Thanks, Daniel. Appreciate the question. So the Church has generally accepted as valid the baptisms performed by such Baptists, provided they are Trinitarian.
Okay.
And the idea of intending to do what the Church means by baptism is interpreted rather broadly here as simply the rite that signifies our inclusion into the Church and into Christ.
Mm-hmm.
Now, it does more than signify. We know this. It affects that union, but it also signifies it. And Baptists hold that generally enough in the mind of the Church to convey valid baptism. Now, if there is a particular case about which one has questions, one can always request a conditional baptism in the Catholic Church. So, for example, if you were baptized as a Baptist and you think there was something deficient about the rite in your case, There's no reason you couldn't be conditionally baptized as a Catholic. You won't be absolutely baptized, but you could be conditionally baptized.
Very good. Back to the phones now at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Let's go now to Joe, a first-time caller in Florida, listening online, EWTN.com. Hello, Joe. What's on your mind today, sir?
I am a Catholic. I wanted to ask Dr. Anders' opinion about this. I had not been able to get to confession for about 3 weeks, and little venial sins were piling up, and I wasn't feeling secure about taking communion, right? So I had withheld myself from taking communion for quite a while, and I managed to get to Mass about 15 minutes before Mass started, and I went into the back where Father was talking to somebody in the sacristy, and I waited until he was finished talking to them. I went in and I just asked him, Father, could you hear a real short confession? And he said, his answer was, he said with a funny smile, he said, oh, we're not hearing confessions this Sunday or last Sunday. It's in the bulletin, he said. And that was his answer. And there was still like almost 15 minutes before Mass started, and I could have blurted out my confession in like 30 seconds, and I went back to my pew and sat there kind of numbed. And then the gospel reading was, on the first day of the week when the doors were closed for fear of the Jews, he appeared among them and breathed on them and said, receive the Holy Spirit. If you forgive the sins of any, they're forgiven, right? It was Divine Mercy Sunday. And then he went on to preach about the cruciality of the sacramental life, and I was kind of numbed and appalled. And I had been to the ER just 2 nights before that. I'd been to the emergency room. I had sudden severe heart pain and difficulty breathing and so on. And I went in there and they checked me out, and it was inconclusive. But you can go at any time, And anyway, I just want to get your opinion on this.
Okay. Yeah, thank you. So I'm sorry. First of all, I'm sorry. I will sympathize with you because I have experienced that and worse. Right? I know of situations of priests refusing sacraments, or of putting impediments to sacraments that strike me as grossly irresponsible at best, and forms of deep pastoral, what's the word I'm looking for, malpractice at the worst. And they are hurtful, scandalous, and of course, with a faithful Catholic, you can abuse the stew out of a faithful Catholic, and they'll come back most of the time, right? But you start doing that to people on the edge, and it may be the last time you ever get the opportunity to abuse that person, because they'll remember that interaction, and they'll say, well, I'm done with the Catholic Church then. And I can think of some specific concrete examples that I know of people who were treated badly pastorally, sometimes by priests, sometimes by lay people, sometimes by religious, and they said, okay, I'm done. I've had it with you Catholics. I'm out of here. And so I think that Jesus talks about this. He says, if anyone causes one of these little ones to stumble, talking about scandal here, better to be thrown into the sea with a millstone tied around their neck. So Christ has some pretty strong words about people in leadership in churches that cause little ones to stumble. So I'm really sympathetic, and I'm really sorry. And the irony of the readings in the homily, of course, exacerbates your sense of abuse here. Now, I don't know the mind of the priest, and so I would like to be charitable and suggest a possible, and I don't know that this is the case, a possible hypothetical explanation. What if Father has discerned that he's got a habitual problem with people showing up right before Mass asking for confession, and it's interfered with his ability to start Mass on time, which is another form of pastoral malpractice. You know, you got a whole congregation sitting out there, and they're waiting for the priest, and he's tied up in the back of the sacristy when there are regularly scheduled times for confessions, and maybe he makes those available, and he's really sort of striving to kind of direct people to those regular times, and except in cases of urgency, right? I could see that being a reason, you know, that he might say, okay, I've made this decision about I'm going to try to point people to the regularly scheduled times, and I've had this problem in the past, and so I'm going to try to stick to my guns. And so I don't know what his motivations were, so I'd like to kind of be charitable. But given the circumstances as you described them, it doesn't seem like it would have been terribly onerous. And generally, the mind of the priest is to be like, you don't know when somebody's going to go. And St. John Bosco was routinely gotten up in the middle of the night to hear confessions.
Wow.
You know, and he would go trudge off to hear confessions at 2 a.m. or something. And in my own life, although I have seen malpractice, so to speak, I've had the opposite experience far more often of me asking for confession in unusual times and places, sometimes awkward times and places, and of priests ever willing
Me too.
to administer the sacrament. So by and large, my own personal experience has been of great pastoral solicitude in the confessional and in the sacrament of penance. And in fact, I would say that is by far and away my strongest experience of pastoral ministry in the Catholic Church. I mean, guy might not be able to preach worth a darn, but he can hear confessions with the best of them. That's generally my experience.
Yeah, I know that if I was walking across the EWTN parking lot, and if I were to see Father Mitch, you know, assuming that he wasn't late to do this show,
I've done that.
And you know what he would say? He'd say, "Giddy up, let's go."
I've done that. I've stopped Mitch in the parking lot before for a confession.
Pretty cool.
Now, my old friend Father Lambert Greenan told me one time when he was in Rome. He's a Dominican, you know. He was stopped by an African priest on the streets of Rome.
Wow.
The man asked him in Latin, because they didn't speak a common language except Latin, "Are you a priest?" And he said, "I am." He said, "Can I go to confession?" He said, "You can." And then they did the whole thing in Latin.
Wow.
They were at a train station. They walked up and down in front of the train station while the Dominican from Ireland heard the African priest's confession in Latin. Then he absolved him in Latin and sent him on his way.
Another reminder, this is the Global Catholic Network.
Absolutely.
All right. Appreciate your call, Joe, and we hope you can get to confession very soon. Let's go now to Jan, a first-time caller in Indiana, listening on the great WSFI. Hey, Jan, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I have a old high school friend who's a strong Nazarene. I've been to church with her during my high school days, and even today she tries to convert me to Nazarene, saying that the Catholic religion is not good. It's false, and even that she has this superiority complex, I guess, that Catholics will not go to heaven, and both of our fathers passed away in the same year, and she made the comment that at least she knew where her father was. Is that a form of Calvinism?
Yeah, thanks. I appreciate the question.
We don't talk very much about the Nazarene Church.
Yeah, so the Nazarene Church has different historical origins, right? Nazarene is a movement that really came in the 19th century. It had origins in Wesleyanism, Methodism, and to a certain extent, there was a kind of sort of stray branch of Calvinism called the New Haven theology, associated with a guy named Nathaniel Taylor, that indirectly influenced the Nazarene tradition. But its theological moorings are very different from mainstream Calvinism. However, they do share one thing in common. They do share this idea that a person can have certainty of their salvation, right? And that they're saved by faith alone and not by any contribution from an individual's own moral life. That's sort of common among Protestants. So, that was really kind of the the main difference between all forms of Protestantism and Catholicism was this question of how do you get to heaven? How do you get to heaven? And the sort of major Protestant emphasis, regardless of denomination, is on salvation by faith alone, whereas the Catholic Church understands that we're really saved by the transformation of our moral life in grace, a transformation that comes through faith, to be sure, but makes a difference to our interior life, and it's on the basis of that interior change that we're saved, which is why we can't really say until glory, I know for sure I'm going to go to heaven. I can't really say that because the possibility of walking away from the moral life is always imminent to me. I have to persevere. Christ says, whoever perseveres to the end will be saved. So you got to do the persevering to make sure you're going to be saved.
Yep, there you go. Jan, thank you so much for your call. We hope that's helpful for you. Call to Communion here on EWTN. About 15 minutes left in the show. Still time to get your call in at 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Tom Price here reminding you to join us for Mother Angelica Live Classics tonight at 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television. Tonight, Mother guides her viewers and listeners on how to counter pride with charity and justice. That is timely advice in any era. That's Mother Angelica Live Classics tonight, 8 p.m. Eastern on EWTN Radio and Television. Do check it out. David's watching us on YouTube this afternoon. David says, what is the best Catholic Bible version? I am coming from a King James Version Bible from the early 70s.
I like the New Revised Standard Version Catholic Edition, personally.
Okay.
That's one I like.
Yeah, good stuff. Appreciate that. One line available for you right now. A couple of lines, actually, to be quite honest about it. 833-288-EWTN. That's 833-288-3986. Virginia writes, Dr. Anders, I heard a priest say that when we are in a state of mortal sin, our prayers merit nothing this side of heaven. So when I haven't been able to get to confession, I feel like my prayers do nothing, which is a terrible feeling. Then I don't even want to pray, but I know I still should. Can you help me think about this or frame it correctly?
Oh, yes. Thank you. What a great question.
Yeah.
So you have to get clear on what merit means. Because that's where you've totally misunderstood merit here. God absolutely hears the prayers of people in mortal sin. Absolutely hears the prayers of people in mortal sin. If he didn't, no one could ever get out of mortal sin.
True.
Right? How do we get out of mortal sin? Repentance, asking for forgiveness, asking for grace. Yeah. If God didn't hear our prayers in mortal sin, we'd absolutely be sunk. So he absolutely can hear your prayers in mortal sin. Merit means that we are literally earning salvation. We're meriting that for which God will reward us. Now, there's all the difference in the world between a gift given in condescension and a reward. So, any parent who's ever had kids, kid says, can I stay up and watch an extra half hour of Ninjago tonight? All right, well, if you finish your homework and do the dishes, all right, and let's say, they get the homework done, but not the dishes. Well, they didn't merit Ninjago. Didn't merit it. Those were the conditions. Got to finish the homework, do the dishes. Only the homework got done. They look at you with those little doe eyes, all disappointed, and you say, okay, go watch Ninjago for half an hour, right? Did they merit it? No. Did you give it as a grace? Yes. It's the difference in the world.
Now I got to look up Ninjago.
It is a Lego product.
Ah.
It's a cartoon sponsored by the Lego company. Those of us who have young male children know all about these things.
Yes, indeed. All right. And here is a question now from Marguerite, who says, Hi, Dr. Anders. Could you please explain the Kerygma? I have been Catholic my whole life. I don't think I understand it. I also can't explain it to other people because I don't understand it myself. Sincerely, Marguerite.
Oh, best question I've had all day. Thank you so much. Love that. Okay, so the Kerygma is just the proclamation of Christ's birth, life, death, resurrection, and ascension into heaven. That's what it is. That's what it means. And the significance of the Kerygma is that by his life, birth, life, death, and resurrection, ascension to heaven, Christ unites us to God. Right? That is the whole shooting match right there. That we are not in union with God because of sin. That Christ has come to remedy the problem of human sin and alienation from God, And he does this through his own divine life. That is the short answer to the Kerygma question. Now we can expound upon that a little bit. How does Christ unite us to God through his divine life? How does he do this? So there's actually several answers to that question. One, he unites us to God by his teaching. Go into all nations and teach them to obey everything I've commanded you. If we hold to the teaching of Christ, it is transformative in our lives. Teaching of Christ is transformative. He unites us to Christ by his holy example. St. Peter says that Christ died, that Christ lived in obedience to God, even to death on a cross, to give to us an example of the moral life of obedience, of yielding to God. So we can be united to Christ by holding to his teaching, by following his example. Now here's where it gets really funky. He also unites us to God by mystically joining our lives to his in the sacraments, so that Jesus, he came to earth to live a human life, but he actually empowers us to live a divine life. He lived a human life that we might live a divine life. In the incarnation, the divine and human are joined in the person of Christ. The divine person, second person of the Trinity, takes on human flesh, assumes a human nature, so that we can be united to the Godhead. God became man that men might become God, St. Athanasius wrote. And when we meet Christ in the sacramental mysteries, in a way unseen, right, the power of his incarnation begins to work in our lives, and we recapitulate his divine life. We are reborn. We become new men and women in Jesus. We receive the mind of Christ. We come to see the world through his eyes. And we are empowered to live in obedience to his teaching and in imitation of his example.
All right, very good. Marguerite, thank you so much for your question. Carla's watching us on YouTube. Why is it that there are different rites in the Catholic Church? Also, in an Eastern Catholic rite, the priest is able to give babies the Eucharist. Why is this not in the other rites?
Right. So there are different rites in the Church because as the apostles went to the four corners of the earth and preached the gospel and celebrated the sacraments, different cultures, different communities correctly and wisely embellished the Eucharistic sacrifice in different ways because cultures are different.
Sure.
Right? And so the liturgies that grew up around the celebration of the sacrifice express those cultural and ethnic differences in language, in ritual, in gesture, in music, in form, right, in ways that are appropriate to their particular indigenous environment. Now, in terms of giving Holy Communion, see, even in the Catholic Church, even in the Roman Catholic Church, the Latin Rite, we understand the sacraments of initiation. What is it that makes you into a Christian? How do you become a Christian? Baptism, of course, opens the door. You step in through baptism. Holy Communion is really sort of the pinnacle of our inception in the Christian life and our communion in Christ, right? So that's also a sacrament of initiation, but it's an ongoing one. And then confirmation, all three of these. Now, in antiquity, it would have been common to keep those together as sacraments of initiation for converts. So somebody becomes a Catholic, they get instructed in the faith, then they would receive the sacraments of initiation all together. That's still the case in the Latin Rite. If you're converted as an adult, you're still going to get them all together, right? Yeah. Now, as it became more common for the children of believers to also be received into the church has to make a judgment call. What is the higher value here? Catechesis or keeping all the sacraments of initiation together? Each is a value. Each conveys something of value. East and West made different prudential judgments, different judgment calls about which value to maintain. So in the Latin West, more emphasis was placed on the importance of catechesis and understanding, which is also part of the ancient rite.
Sure.
And in the East, more emphasis was placed on keeping the sacraments of initiation together. So both are beautiful expressions of Catholic truths.
All right, Carla, thanks so much for watching us today on YouTube. Let's go now to Alana, a first-time caller in New York, listening on her Alexa device. Alana, what's on your mind today?
Hi, I recently left the New Age and came back to Catholicism and have been studying Christian apologetics. And I would like a good resource or reference in regards to idols and symbols and statues and things of that nature, because from my background in New Age, I want to avoid any type of idolatry, but it's something that we're surrounded by in our church, and I would like to be able to argue why that is acceptable for us or why not.
Oh, sure, absolutely. So when it comes to sort of a one-volume, helpful book of apologetics that will address these kinds of questions, Carl Keating's book, Catholicism and Fundamentalism, is a great resource because he just has sort of Q&A on all this kind of stuff. If you want some discussion just of relics and saints and devotion to the Blessed Virgin, you can actually research my article that I wrote on the topic called Relics, Saints, and the Assumption of Mary at the website calledtocommunion.com.
Okay, very good. And thank you, Alana, for your question. Here's one now from Mary. In the Apostles' Creed, it says, quote, "And he rose again from the dead." Well, since Jesus only rose once, why is the word again used? I tried to find an explanation of this phrase in the Catholic Catechism, but to no avail. I appreciate your kindness to all the callers. Thank you for everything you do to help all of us understand our Catholic faith better.
Thank you. I appreciate this. I appreciate the question and the kind words. This is just infelicitous, idiomatic language. That's all it is. It doesn't mean that he rose and then rose again.
Oh, okay.
There's only one resurrection. It's just the way the underlying Latin phrase was rendered into idiomatic English several centuries ago.
There you go, Mary. And here is Rose now, a first-time caller driving through New York, listening on the Station of the Cross. Hey, Rose, what's on your mind today?
Hi. I have Auntie Roman Catholic, and when I have members of the family who were brought up Lutheran, and when they come to church, in my church, they also go up to receive the Holy Communion. Is that something they should be doing even though they haven't converted into Catholic?
I appreciate the question. A non-Catholic, especially a Protestant like a Lutheran, should not normally receive communion in a Catholic church. And there's lots of reasons for that. One of them is Catholics are not supposed to receive communion in Catholic churches if they are not properly disposed and if they have not had access to the sacrament of confession, right? Yeah. So because Protestants are not subject to the church's jurisdiction, they're not subject to the sacrament of the confessional, they don't have a way to verify that they're properly disposed in the way that a Catholic does. And so that puts their soul at risk in a way that a Catholic is not at risk. Also, communion signifies that we are in union regarding the content of the faith. And since Lutherans do not believe the Catholic faith, it is a contradiction for them to signal by their activity that they believe the Catholic faith. Because going to communion in the Catholic Church says, I believe the Catholic faith.
Yeah.
And it's not a matter of indifference, like which church you go to, because Christ founded the Catholic Church. Martin Luther founded the Lutheran Church. So it's a sort of performative contradiction for a Lutheran to receive communion in a Catholic Church. So we shouldn't do that. Now, the only exception, a Lutheran who is in danger of death, and has Catholic faith in the sacraments, can receive communion from a Catholic priest. But that's not the situation you're talking about. These folks aren't in danger of death, and they don't have Catholic faith in the sacrament.
There you go. Rose, thank you so much for your call. Could not get to Bill in northern Minnesota. Also a call in the process of being screened coming out of Houston. If you folks would call us back tomorrow, we'll try to get you on as soon as we can. In fact, we'll put you at the head of the queue. Dr. David Anders, thank you, sir.
Tom, thank you.
We do this program Monday through Friday here on EWTN Radio, live most cases, at 2 p.m. Eastern with an encore at 11 p.m. Eastern. Check out the podcast at EWTNradio.net. Until next time, I'm Tom Price along with Dr. David Anders. See you then. God bless.
Hello, Father Mitch.
Yes, sir. What can we do for you?
How do we know that Jesus was in his early